Hi, Marvin Lindsay, Senior Pastor, First Presbyterian Church. Today's cup holder chat. Hey, Dr. Garrett, the car is stationary. It's actually in my garage. This is really safe. Today's cup holder chat is about persecution. I am preaching a sermon on Sunday about a persecutor of the early church becoming a disciple and missionary of the risen Jesus. It's a story about Saul. His name is also Paul, so not King Saul from last week's scripture lesson, but different dude this Sunday. And he was a strong opponent of the early Jesus movement. He was there when the first disciple of Jesus was put to death for his faith in Jesus after Jesus' resurrection. That man's name was Stephen. He preached this kind of incendiary sermon. It's in Acts, it's at chapter 7, that connected the people who had put Jesus to death and the people who were resisting the claim that he was alive in line with some of the worst characters in the history of God's people. And they got so mad at him for preaching the sermon that they put him to death. They stoned him. They stoned him to death. And Saul, was in on it. He sort of held the cloaks, it says, for the people who were actually throwing the stones. And then he went on his own rampage against the early followers of Jesus. He went door to door, house to house, dragging out people who had some loyalty to Jesus in the city of Jerusalem and put them in jail. And then he got permission to go to Damascus to do the same thing there. And so in Sunday scripture reading, you're going to hear the story about how he's kind of walking down from Jerusalem down the highway to Damascus, kind of muttering to himself about what he's going to do to these people when he gets his hands on them. I think death is one of the things he has in mind, along with jailing people, beating people. And along the way, he's confronted by Jesus Christ himself, who appears to him in a blinding white light that blinds him and asks him why he's persecuting him, and then sends him along his way and converts him from being the great persecutor of the earliest Christians to being the greatest missionary and evangelist and planter of new churches and new faith communities that the church has ever seen. Some people say that Paul is really the second founder of Christianity because of his extraordinary work at extending the good news of Jesus Christ beyond the Jewish community. Remember, Jesus was Jewish, into non-Jewish communities. So that's what persecution is. Persecution is being killed, being jailed, being beaten, because you are a follower of Jesus Christ, because you are on the Christian way. Persecution, however, is not being kept out of your church on Sunday morning because of a shelter-in-place or stay-at-home order that the local or state authorities have established. I think that the vast majority of Christians get this. The vast majority of Christians understand that this is an extraordinary situation that we're in. There is a pandemic in the land. We are faced with a deadly and highly contagious virus for which there is no vaccine and no natural immunity. And that means that coming together in large groups is simply unadvisable because it's an easy way to spread the virus. And so as an act of neighborly love, we are not gathering for corporate worship. Now, I know here in Missouri, gatherings for corporate worship are allowed now. Our session, our governing board at First Presbyterian Church, is taking this slowly. We're not going to gather for corporate worship until June 28th. But I think that we have done what we would have done anyway, even if it hadn't been required by the authorities. We've refrained from coming together because we don't want to give the virus to other people. And we don't want people that we know and love and worship with and serve with to become sick and die because of our behavior. So But there are some pastors out there who have been eager to get their flocks back together. The cynical part of me wonders if it's so that they can pass an offering plate. And they have cried religious persecution. They have cried that their constitutional rights are being violated because of shelter-in-place and stay-at-home orders that don't allow people to gather for worship. And again, nothing could be further from the truth. Persecution is being jailed, being killed, being threatened because of your faith in Jesus Christ. It is not public health authorities imposing temporary and prudent orders to restrain the growth of a deadly virus. It's just not. It's just not. Is it a major inconvenience? Yes. Has it caused us sadness and grief? Yes. Especially for people whose church life is their church is their only family, and their church family is their only significant social network. Yes, it has brought tremendous psychological pain and suffering to these people. Some of them are members of our own congregation, but it's not persecution. It's not persecution. It's simply a trial that we are having to undergo and that we are having to endure. I think when we label every inconvenience or every obstacle or every experience of pain and suffering persecution, I think that we diminish the meaning of the word. And that does a disservice to people in the world who are actually facing persecution, because we do have brothers and sisters in other countries where there is not freedom of religion, and where simply confessing that Jesus is Lord is grounds for jailing or grounds for even death. There are places in the world where government agents monitor the content of sermons, whether they're given in person or online, to make sure that nothing bad or critical is said about the government. And, that's not happening here. So as we mourn and lament the social cost of the pandemic, let us also pray for people who really do face persecution, and not minimize their suffering by trivializing and watering down the definition of the word persecution. And most of all, let's be thankful for the rights that we enjoy in this free society. We're still able to worship together online. We're still able to confess that Jesus is Lord. And we are still free to go about our business, albeit in a somewhat constrained state, in order to protect other people and protect them from getting the virus. So as free people, I invite you to worship with me online this Sunday morning at 10 a.m. You can find the service at www.fpccolumbia.org. See you then.